The crystalline towers of Zenturi Prime sparkled like diamonds under their twin suns. For 3,000 years, these beautiful structures had housed one of the galaxy's most peaceful civilizations. The Zenturi people lived in harmony, never knowing war, never facing violence. Their greatest conflicts came from disagreements about art or philosophy, solved through gentle discussion and meditation. Today, everything changed. Chancellor Vexandra watched in horror as enemy ships filled the sky. The Corac Empire had arrived with hundreds of massive vessels, each one larger than the biggest Zenturi city. Black smoke rose from the outer settlements where the first attacks had already begun. The beautiful crystal buildings lay in ruins, their rainbow lights now dark forever. "How many more ships are coming?" Vexandra asked her aide, though she feared the answer. "Our scouts report at least 500 more vessels approaching from the dark space beyond our system," came the trembling reply. "They will arrive within hours." Vexandra's delicate hands shook as she watched another district of her homeworld burn. The Zenturi had no real military. Their few defense ships were designed for rescue work and space exploration, not war. Against the Corac Empire's brutal war machine, they were helpless as children. The Corac were everything the Zenturi were not. Where the Zenturi valued peace, the Corac worshipped strength. Where the Zenturi created beauty, the Corac brought destruction. For 50 years, the Empire had swept across this part of the galaxy, enslaving entire species and turning their worlds into factory planets. "Chancellor, we must evacuate the capital," urged General Kithal, the closest thing the Zenturi had to a military leader. "Our civilian transports can carry perhaps half the population to safety before the main fleet arrives." "And leave the other half to die?" Vexandra's voice cracked with emotion. "There must be another way." On the other side of the galaxy, far from the Zenturi's dying world, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison sat at his post in Terra Station's communications center. Earth's deep space monitoring facility orbited quietly around humanity's homeworld, scanning the darkness for signals from distant stars. Jake was tired. His shift had started 12 hours ago, and he still had 4 more hours before his replacement arrived. The coffee in his mug had gone cold long ago, but he kept drinking it anyway. Space was mostly empty and quiet, which made his job incredibly boring most of the time. Dr. Lisa Parker worked at the station next to his, analyzing any signals they picked up. Most were just natural radio waves from dying stars or solar storms. Sometimes they caught messages between trading ships or diplomatic channels from the few alien species Earth had made contact with. "Jake, are you seeing this?" Lisa's voice cut through his drowsiness. "Seeing what?" Jake straightened up and checked his screens. "I'm picking up a transmission from way out in Sector 7. It's not like anything we've seen before." Jake turned his attention to the signal Lisa had found. The transmission was powerful, much stronger than normal communications. It was also broadcasting on multiple frequencies at once, as if someone wanted to make sure the entire galaxy could hear it. "Can you translate it?" Jake asked. Lisa's fingers danced across her keyboard as she fed the signal into Earth's universal translation program. The computer had learned dozens of alien languages over the past century as humanity made contact with other species. After a few minutes, words began appearing on her screen. "This is Chancellor Vexandra of the Zenturi Federation," the translation read. "We are under attack by the Corac Empire. Our defenses have failed. Our people are dying. We broadcast this message to any civilized species who might hear it. We ask for humanitarian aid. We ask for medical supplies. We ask for rescue ships. Please, if there is anyone out there who values peace and life, help us. The Corac ships will complete their invasion within days. After that, it will be too late." This message repeats. Jake and Lisa stared at each other in silence for a moment. "How far away is Sector 7? Jake asked. "About 3 weeks by hyperspace jump," Lisa replied, still staring at the translation. "Jake, this is a species asking for help. They're about to be wiped out." "I know," Jake said quietly. "Get me a priority channel to Fleet Command." Within an hour, the Zenturi distress signal was playing in conference rooms across Earth's military headquarters. Admiral Carl Henderson sat at the head of a long table filled with officers and government officials. General Amanda Foster reviewed tactical reports while Secretary of Defense William Carter examined diplomatic options. "What do we know about these Zenturi?" Admiral Henderson asked. Dr. Alex Turner, Earth's leading xenobiologist, stood to address the room. "From what we can gather from their previous communications, They're a completely peaceful species. No military to speak of. They live on a low-gravity world with very stable weather. No natural predators, no dangerous animals, no violent storms. They've never experienced war or conflict on any meaningful scale. And the Corac? General Foster asked. Bad news, replied Intelligence Director Maria Gonzalez. They're a conquest species. They've been expanding aggressively for decades, enslaving every civilization they encounter. Their military technology is advanced and their tactics are brutal. They don't negotiate and they don't show mercy. Secretary Carter cleared his throat. The Galactic Council has been debating what to do about this situation for hours. So far, they've formed 3 committees to study the problem and scheduled a formal debate for next week. Admiral Henderson snorted. Next week? These people will be dead by next week. That's the problem, Carter continued. Most of the galaxy's civilized species are like the Zenturi. They've never dealt with real violence. They think everything can be solved through discussion and compromise. They don't understand that some enemies can't be reasoned with. General Foster looked around the table. What are Earth's options? We could send medical supplies and rescue ships like they're asking for, suggested Dr. Turner. But if the Corac are as ruthless as our intelligence suggests, any relief effort would be destroyed before it could help anyone. We could try diplomatic contact with the Corac, offered Secretary Carter. Maybe we can negotiate some kind of settlement. Admiral Henderson shook his head. From what I've read about them, the Corac only understand one thing: strength. They won't negotiate with someone they see as weak. The room fell silent as everyone considered their options. Earth had made contact with several alien species over the past century, but they had always been careful to avoid getting involved in interstellar conflicts. Humanity was still relatively new to the galactic community, and they didn't want to make enemies. But something about the Zentari's desperate plea for help struck a chord with Earth's leaders. Maybe it was because humans had once been helpless against stronger enemies themselves. Maybe it was because the idea of an entire peaceful civilization being enslaved went against everything Earth stood for. There is another option, Admiral Henderson said slowly. We could deploy the 5th Fleet to Zentari space. The suggestion sent a ripple of surprise through the room. The 5th Fleet was Earth's most powerful military force, designed for deep space combat operations. It had never been used in actual warfare, but it represented the best of human military technology and training. That would mean going to war with the Corac Empire, Secretary Carter pointed out. Are we prepared for that kind of commitment? General Foster studied the tactical report spread across the table. The 5th Fleet could reach Zentari space in 18 days if we pushed the hyperspace engines hard. We'd arrive with 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and a full marine expeditionary force. Against the Corac numbers we're seeing, it would be a tough fight. But doable, Admiral Henderson asked. Doable, Foster confirmed. The question is whether we should do it. Admiral Henderson looked around the table one more time, then made his decision. Captain Sam Rodriguez will take the UES Vindicator and lead a battle group to Zentari space. Primary mission: protect civilian populations and prevent genocide. Secondary mission: establish Earth's presence as a protector of peaceful species. As the meeting broke up and orders were given, none of Earth's leaders realized what they had just set in motion. The Zentari had asked for aid, expecting medical supplies and rescue ships. Instead, they were about to meet the products of evolution on a world where violence was a daily reality, and survival meant being stronger than everything trying to kill you. The Deathworlders of Earth were coming to help, whether the galaxy was ready for them or not. 18 days after leaving Earth, Captain Sam Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Vindicator as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Zentari Prime. Around him, 11 other human warships appeared in flashes of blue light, their dark hulls bristling with weapons and armor plating. "Sir, we're getting multiple contacts on long-range sensors," reported Communications Officer Ryan Brooks. "Looks like we beat the main Corac fleet here, but there are already enemy ships in the inner system." Rodriguez studied the tactical display. 3 dozen Corac vessels were scattered around Zentari space, most of them smaller ships conducting raids on the outer colonies. The main Zentari population centers were still intact, but black smoke columns rose from several cities on the planet below. "Any response from the Zentari government?" Rodriguez asked. "Yes, sir, but they seem confused," Brooks replied. "They keep asking who we are and why we brought warships. I think they were expecting medical transports," Rodriguez almost smiled. The Zentari had asked for help, and Earth had sent them the most effective help humanity could provide. The fact that it came in the form of heavily armed battle cruisers was just how humans operated. Down on Zentari Prime, Chancellor Vexandra stood in her Crystal Tower's command center, staring at the scanner displays with growing fear. The ships that had just arrived were massive, almost as large as Corac dreadnoughts, and they were clearly built for war. Every surface bristled with weapon systems, and their hulls were covered in thick armor plating. "Are those the reinforcements we requested?" asked General Kithal. "I don't know," Vexandra replied, her voice shaking. "They don't look like any rescue ships I've ever seen." The largest of the new vessels was moving toward Zentari Prime, while the others spread out to form what looked like an attack formation. To the peaceful Zentari, who had never seen real warships before, the human fleet looked as threatening as the Korthic Empire itself. "Incoming transmission from the lead vessel," announced the communications technician. "Put it through," Vexandra ordered. The holographic display activated, showing a human face for the first time in Zentari history. Captain Rodriguez appeared to be middle-aged, with short gray hair and calm brown eyes. He wore a dark blue uniform with insignia the Zentari didn't recognize. "Chancellor Vexandra, I'm Captain Sam Rodriguez of the United Earth Ship Vindicator. We received your distress signal and we're here to help." Vexandra tried to hide her shock at seeing this alien species. The human looked similar to some species she had encountered before, but there was something different about his eyes. They were alert and calculating in a way that made her nervous. "Captain Rodriguez, we are grateful for your response to our call for aid," she replied carefully. "However, we were hoping for medical supplies and rescue transports, not military vessels." Rodriguez looked puzzled. "Ma'am, your message said you were under attack by a hostile empire. Military vessels are exactly what you need. We prefer peaceful solutions to conflicts," Vexandra explained. "Perhaps your people could help us negotiate with the Korthac leadership." Now Rodriguez looked truly confused. "Chancellor, from what we understand, the Korthac have already attacked your colonies. Negotiation usually works better before the shooting starts." Ambassador Kira Shaw stepped forward into the camera view. She had been chosen to lead Earth's first diplomatic contact with the Zentari because of her experience with peaceful alien species. Next to her stood Dr. Alex Turner, a tall man with curious eyes who specialized in studying alien cultures. "Chancellor, perhaps we could meet in person to discuss the situation," Shaw suggested. "We'd like to understand your people better so we can provide the most effective assistance." 2 hours later, a small human shuttle landed in the courtyard of Vexandra's Crystal Palace. The Zentari who watched the landing were amazed by how heavily built the small craft was. Even their transport shuttle had thick armor and what looked like defensive weapons. Ambassador Shaw emerged first, followed by Dr. Turner and Major Tony Garcia, who served as their security escort. The three humans wore lighter versions of the military uniforms they had seen on Captain Rodriguez, but even their diplomatic gear looked more robust than anything the Zentari used. "Welcome to Zentari Prime," Chancellor Vexandra said as she approached the visitors. She was tall and thin, like most of her species, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow slightly in the afternoon light. Her movements were graceful but fragile-looking. "Thank you for meeting with us, Chancellor," Shaw replied. "We hope we can work together to resolve this crisis." As they walked toward the palace, Dr. Turner couldn't help but stare at the Zentari architecture. Everything was made of some kind of crystal that grew in organic curves and spirals. The buildings looked beautiful but incredibly delicate, as if a strong wind might shatter them. Inside the palace, the humans were offered seats that looked more like works of art than furniture. Major Garcia remained standing, his eyes constantly scanning the room for potential threats. His alert posture made several Zentari servants nervous. "Tell us about your homeworld," Vexandra requested. "We know very little about Earth or your species." Dr. Turner smiled. "Earth is what we call a Class M planet. We have a wide variety of climates and environments. Gravity is about 1.2 times what you have here, and we experience regular weather patterns including storms, earthquakes, and volcanic activity." The Zentari in the room exchanged worried glances. Their own world had perfectly stable weather and no geological activity. "What about dangerous animals?" asked General Kithal. "Oh, we have plenty of those," Turner continued enthusiastically. "Large predators like bears and lions, venomous snakes and spiders, sharks in the oceans. Human settlements had to be defended against wild animal attacks until fairly recently in our history. Chancellor Vexandra looked pale. Your people grew up fighting dangerous animals? Fighting, avoiding, or domesticating them, Shaw added. It's just part of life on Earth. And natural disasters? Another Zenturi official asked. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts, Turner listed. Most human cities are built to withstand at least some of these events. We've learned to adapt. The room fell silent as the Zenturi tried to process this information. The idea of living on a world where nature itself was constantly trying to kill you was completely alien to their peaceful existence. Major Garcia spoke for the first time since arriving. Chancellor, we need to discuss the Corac threat. Our scouts report that their main fleet will arrive in less than 48 hours. We need to coordinate our defensive preparations. Defensive preparations? Vexandra asked. Evacuation plans, civilian shelters, defensive positions, Garcia explained. We need to know which areas are most important to defend and which can be abandoned if necessary. Abandoned? The word seemed to shock every Zenturi in the room. Ambassador Shaw realized they were approaching this all wrong. Chancellor, perhaps you could tell us how your people usually handle conflicts. We discuss the problem until everyone agrees on a solution, Vexandra replied. Sometimes it takes many days of meditation and debate, but we always find a peaceful answer. And if the other party refuses to discuss things peacefully? Shaw asked. That has never happened before, General Kithall admitted. All civilized species prefer peace to violence. Dr. Turner leaned forward. The Corac aren't a civilized species by your standards. They're a conquest culture. They expand their territory by destroying or enslaving other species. They don't negotiate because they don't see any benefit in allowing you to continue existing. The horrible truth of their situation began to sink in for the Zenturi leadership. They had spent their entire existence believing that all intelligent life was fundamentally peaceful and reasonable. The idea that an entire species could be dedicated to violence and destruction was almost impossible for them to accept. But surely they can be reasoned with, Vexandra insisted, if we offer them tribute or trade agreements or cultural exchange. Major Garcia shook his head. Ma'am, they're not interested in tribute or trade. They want your world as a factory planet and your people as slave labor. The only thing that will stop them is force. We don't know how to use force, General Kithall admitted quietly. Our people have no experience with violence. We don't even have real weapons. That's why we're here, Shaw said gently. Earth has extensive experience dealing with hostile forces. We can protect your people while they evacuate to safety. But at what cost? Vexandra asked. If we accept your help, what will you expect in return? The question surprised the humans. Shaw exchanged glances with Turner and Garcia before answering. Chancellor, we don't want anything in return, she said. When someone asks for help, you help them. That's just what decent people do. This answer seemed to confuse the Zenturi even more. In their experience, every action had a carefully balanced exchange of benefits. The idea that someone would risk their lives to help strangers without expecting anything in return was as alien to them as violence had been. As the meeting continued, both sides began to realize how different their cultures really were. The Zenturi couldn't understand how anyone could choose violence over negotiation. The humans couldn't understand how anyone could survive without being prepared to fight when necessary. War Commander Thexel stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the scanner displays with satisfaction. His massive fleet of 230 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zenturi system. The Corac Empire's conquest machine was finally here to claim another prize. Report, he commanded in his harsh voice. All ships have arrived successfully. War Commander, replied his second officer. The Zenturi homeworld shows minimal defensive activity. Our advanced scouts report that most of their pathetic excuse for a military has already fled to the outer planets. Thexel smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Corac were a warrior race, tall and powerful, with thick gray skin and red eyes adapted for hunting. They had evolved on a world where only the strongest survived, and they brought that philosophy to the stars. What about those unknown ships our scouts detected? Thexel asked. Still in orbit around the Zenturi homeworld, War Commander. Only 12 vessels. Their design is unfamiliar, but they appear to be military craft of some kind. Thexel studied the tactical display. 12 ships against his fleet of over 200? Someone was either very brave or very stupid. Open a communication channel to the Zentari leadership, he ordered. It's time to offer them the standard terms. On Zentari Prime, Chancellor Vexandra received the transmission in her Crystal Palace command center. The holographic display showed Thexel in all his terrifying glory, his massive form covered in battle scars and military decorations. I am War Commander Thexel of the Korthak Empire, the alien announced. Your pathetic little civilization ends today. You have two choices: surrender now and become slaves of the Empire, or resist and be destroyed completely. You have 1 hour to decide. The transmission ended, leaving the Zentari leadership in stunned silence. Ambassador Shaw and Dr. Turner, who had been observing from the corner of the room, exchanged grim looks. 1 hour, General Kithal whispered. How can they expect us to make such a decision in 1 hour? Because they don't care what you decide, Shaw replied. This isn't a real negotiation. They're just following their standard procedure before beginning the attack. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system. Chancellor, we need to talk now. Minutes later, Rodriguez appeared on the holographic display from his ship's bridge. Behind him, human officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency that impressed even the terrified Zentari. Chancellor, my scouts report that the Korthak fleet is already moving toward the inner system, Rodriguez said. They'll be in weapons range of your planet in 6 hours. Can you stop them? Vexandra asked desperately. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, they outnumber us almost 20 to 1. In a straight fight, those aren't good odds. Then we should surrender, suggested one of the Zentari advisors. At least some of our people will survive as slaves. No, Rodriguez said firmly. Earth doesn't abandon people who ask for help. We'll find a way. But you just said the odds are against you, Vexandra pointed out. I said they weren't good odds, Rodriguez corrected. I didn't say we couldn't win. The difference in attitude was striking. Where the Zentari saw impossible circumstances and prepared to give up, the humans saw a difficult challenge and prepared to fight. 3 hours later, the first engagement began when a group of Korthak fighters attacked a Zentari refugee convoy, trying to escape to the outer planets. The convoy's escort ships were beautiful crystalline vessels designed for ceremonial purposes, not combat. They were destroyed within minutes. That's when Marine pilot Jack Bennett arrived. Bennett led a squadron of human interceptor craft, small but heavily armed fighters designed for space combat. His ships dove into the Korthak formation like hunting hawks attacking a flock of prey birds. Blue Squadron, engage at will, Bennett ordered over the radio. Remember, these are the bastards shooting at civilians. The Korthak pilots had expected easy targets like the Zentari escorts. Instead, they found themselves facing opponents who moved with deadly precision and fought with controlled fury. Human interceptors used the debris field from the destroyed convoy ships as cover, appearing from behind wreckage to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing again. Within 20 minutes, the entire Korthak raiding force was destroyed. Not a single human fighter had been lost. War Commander Thexel watched the battle reports with growing confusion. His elite pilots, veterans of dozens of conquest campaigns, had been wiped out by a tiny force of unknown fighters. How was that possible? Send the second attack wing, he ordered.
3 full squadrons.
I want those unknown ships destroyed. The second wave of Korthak fighters approached more carefully, using their superior numbers to surround the human squadron. But Bennett and his pilots had been trained in Earth's military academies, where tactical innovation was prized above overwhelming force. Scatter formation, Bennett commanded. Draw them into the asteroid belt. The human fighters split up and fled toward a nearby cluster of space rocks, with the Korthak squadrons following confidently. The aliens expected to corner their enemies among the asteroids and finish them off. Instead, they found themselves in a carefully planned trap. Lieutenant Sophie Kane's Marine assault team had positioned themselves on several of the larger asteroids, armed with portable missile launchers. As the Korthak fighters pursued Bennett's squadron through the rock field, they flew directly into Kane's crossfire. Light them up, Kane ordered. Missiles streaked out from hidden positions on multiple asteroids, catching the Korthak fighters completely by surprise. The enemy formation disintegrated as fighters exploded or spun out of control, crashing into the rocks they had been using for cover. On his flagship, Thexel slammed his fist against his command chair. In less than 4 hours, he had lost over 60 fighters and gained nothing in return. These unknown defenders fought with a viciousness that reminded him of his own people. but with a tactical skill that his warriors couldn't match. "Who are these enemies?" he demanded. "Our intelligence division has analyzed their ship designs and combat tactics," his aide reported. "They appear to be called humans from a world called Earth. We have no previous records of contact with this species. What kind of world produces fighters like these?" Thexel asked. The aide consulted his datapad. "According to our analysis, Earth is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld war commander. High gravity, unstable weather, dangerous animal life, frequent natural disasters." Thexal felt a chill run through his massive frame. Even the Korthak homeworld was only classified as Class 8. A Class 12 world would be considered barely habitable by most galactic species. "Are you telling me these humans evolved on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy?" he asked. "Yes, War Commander. Our xenobiology experts believe that such an environment would produce extremely aggressive and adaptable predator species." For the first time since beginning the invasion, Thexal felt genuine concern. The Korthak Empire had conquered 40 star systems by attacking civilizations that had never experienced real warfare. They used terror tactics and overwhelming force against enemies who would surrender rather than face destruction. But these humans showed no sign of fear or willingness to surrender. They fought like they enjoyed it, using tactics that turned the Korthak's numerical advantage against them. Down on Zenturi Prime, Colonel Danny Walsh coordinated the defense of the planet's capital city with his Marine ground forces. Walsh was a veteran of Earth's toughest military campaigns, a hard-faced man who treated impossible odds as a personal challenge. "Sir, the Zentari civilian leaders are asking if they should begin evacuation procedures," reported Sergeant Maria Santos. Walsh looked at the tactical displays showing incoming Korthak dropships. "Tell them evacuation is for people who think they're going to lose," he replied. "We're not losing." The first Korthak landing craft touched down in the crystalline spires of the outer city. Elite Korthak warriors emerged, expecting to face the same helpless resistance they had encountered on dozens of other worlds. Instead, they met Staff Sergeant Pete Collins and his urban warfare specialists. Collins had fought in the ruins of Earth's most dangerous cities, where every building could hide an enemy and every street corner might be a trap. The beautiful crystal towers of the Zentari capital became a maze of defensive positions and killing fields under his direction. "Remember, these alien bastards think they can just walk in here and take whatever they want," Collins told his Marines over the radio. "Let's show them what happens when they mess with people under Earth's protection." The Korthak warriors advanced through the city streets with their usual brutal confidence. They had terrorized hundreds of species across the galaxy, and they expected these new enemies to break and run like all the others. They couldn't have been more wrong. Human Marines appeared from concealed positions in buildings and behind barricades, firing with deadly accuracy before vanishing again. The Korthak found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to stand still and be killed, that used the urban environment like a weapon. Corporal Jenny Lee led a team of Marines in a running battle through the crystal corridors of a Zentari apartment complex. The aliens followed, confident in their superior numbers and firepower, but Lee had grown up in the dangerous neighborhoods of Earth's megacities. War Commander Thexal stared at the battle reports with growing rage and disbelief. In just 6 hours of fighting, his forces had lost over 100 fighters and 3 full battalions of ground troops. The humans were not just resisting, they were winning. "Deploy the terror weapons," he commanded. "Release the fear gas on the civilian population centers. Begin orbital bombardment of their capital city. These vermin need to learn what happens when they defy the Korthak Empire." His officers rushed to carry out the orders. The Korthak had conquered 40 worlds using the same tactics. First, they would terrify the civilian population with chemical weapons designed to cause panic and madness. Then they would destroy a few cities from orbit to show their power. Finally, the enemy leadership would surrender to save whatever remained of their people. It had worked perfectly every time before. The first wave of fear gas canisters struck the outer districts of the Zentari capital. The chemical weapon was designed to trigger the deepest terror responses in most alien species, causing them to flee in panic or collapse in helpless fear. The gas clouds drifted through the crystal towers where human Marines had taken defensive positions. Staff Sergeant Pete Collins watched the green mist approach his squad's position with curious interest. "Gas masks, everyone," he ordered calmly. Sergeant Maria Santos checked her equipment. Sarge, the scanners say this stuff is supposed to cause extreme fear reactions in most species. Good thing we're not most species, Collins replied with a grim smile. Back on Earth, we have spiders that can kill you with one bite, storms that can level entire cities, and diseases that make your organs shut down. A little green gas doesn't scare people who grew up with that. The fear gas had no effect on the human forces. They had evolved on a world where real terror came from very real threats, predators, natural disasters, and environmental dangers. Artificial chemical weapons seemed mild compared to what they had faced growing up. The Zenturi civilians, however, were affected badly by the gas. They fled in panic through the crystal corridors, their delicate minds unable to cope with the artificial fear being pumped into their systems. Dr. Lisa Parker worked frantically in the emergency medical center she had set up in the Zenturi Palace. She was trying to treat gas victims while coordinating with Zenturi Dr. Kinth, who had never seen chemical warfare before. The antidote should neutralize the fear chemicals in about 20 minutes, Parker explained as she prepared another injection. But your people's nervous systems are much more sensitive than ours. They'll need time to recover. Kinth watched in amazement as the human doctor worked. Parker moved with calm efficiency even as explosions shook the building around them. Her hands never trembled even when treating the worst cases. How do you remain so calm? Kinth asked. Are you not afraid of dying? Parker looked up from her patient. Of course I'm afraid. But fear is just information. It tells you there's danger, so you can deal with it. On Earth, we learn early that panic gets you killed. Navy Corpsman Chris Morgan arrived with more wounded civilians. He had been running medical supplies through active combat zones for the past 3 hours, treating injuries that the Zenturi had never seen before. Doc, we've got burns from energy weapons and some kind of nerve damage from those gas attacks, Morgan reported. The Zenturi physiology is different from anything in our medical databases. Then we adapt, Parker replied simply. Same as always. Outside the medical center, the orbital bombardment began. Corac heavy cruisers in high orbit fired massive energy beams down at the Zenturi capital, intending to destroy entire city blocks and terrorize the population into surrender. Captain Rodriguez watched the bombardment from his command bridge and made a decision that would have seemed insane to any other species. All ships, prepare for atmospheric entry, he ordered. We're taking the fight to them. Communications officer Ryan Brooks looked shocked. Sir, taking warships into a planetary atmosphere during active bombardment is extremely dangerous. That's why they won't expect it, Rodriguez replied. The Corac are used to fighting enemies who avoid risk. Time to show them what humans do when someone threatens civilians under our protection. The 12 human warships dove into Zenturi Prime's atmosphere like metal meteors, their hulls glowing red-hot from the friction. The Corac orbital bombardment systems were designed to target stationary cities, not moving spacecraft flying at impossible speeds through the upper atmosphere. Lieutenant Elena Martinez led a squadron of human fighters in the most dangerous reconnaissance mission of her career. Her job was to locate the Corac command ship while flying through an active battle zone, filled with energy beams and missile fire. Martinez had learned to fly in Earth's violent weather systems, where sudden storms could appear without warning and wind patterns could change in seconds. Dodging enemy fire while gathering intelligence was just another day at the office. Control, this is Scout 1, she reported over the radio. I've got eyes on the enemy command vessel. It's a massive dreadnought, about 3 times the size of our biggest ships. Position coordinates uploading now. Outstanding work, Scout 1, came Rodriguez's voice. Get back to base. We'll take it from here. Martinez's fighter streaked through the upper atmosphere, weaving between energy beams and missile contrails with the casual skill of someone who had trained in Earth's most dangerous flight conditions. Down in the city, Colonel Walsh received the targeting data and smiled. The Corac command ship was sitting in high orbit, protected by layers of escort vessels and defensive systems. Any sane military force would consider it an impossible target. Sergeant Santos, prep the orbital strike team, Walsh ordered. We're going hunting. Santos looked at the tactical data. Sir, that ship is in high orbit. How exactly are we supposed to reach it? The same way we reach anything else that needs killing, Walsh replied. We improvise, adapt, and overcome. The plan Walsh developed would have terrified most military commanders. He was going to use captured Corac transport ships to carry a strike team directly to the enemy flagship. The mission required flying through active combat zones, boarding a heavily defended enemy vessel, and fighting through corridors filled with hostile aliens. For human Marines who had trained for urban warfare on Earth's most dangerous worlds, it was just another Tuesday. The strike team launched from the Crystal City's spaceport in 3 captured Corac shuttles. The enemy vessels had been hastily repaired and fitted with human navigation systems, creating hybrid craft that looked like nothing else in the galaxy. Marine pilot Jack Bennett flew the lead shuttle, weaving through the space battle with the same aggressive tactics he had used against the Corac fighters earlier. "Remember, people," Walsh announced over the radio, "we're not just fighting for the Zenturi. We're establishing Earth's reputation in this galaxy. When this is over, every species out here needs to know what happens when you threaten people under human protection." The boarding operation began when Bennett's shuttle docked with the Corac flagship's cargo bay. The Marines who poured out of the human craft moved with a speed and aggression that shocked the enemy. Soldiers Corac warriors were used to fighting terrified civilians and untrained planetary defense forces. They had never faced opponents who had spent their entire lives preparing for exactly this kind of close combat. Sergeant Santos led her squad through the enemy ship's corridors, using breach charges and flash grenades to clear rooms full of hostile aliens. The Corac soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans individually, but they had never learned to fight as a coordinated team against opponents who refused to be intimidated. "Contact front," Santos called out as her team encountered a squad of Corac Marines. The aliens opened fire with heavy weapons, expecting their enemies to take cover and return fire from defensive positions. Instead, the humans charged straight at them. The tactic was so unexpected that the Corac warriors froze for a crucial second. In that moment of hesitation, Santos and her Marines closed the distance and engaged in hand-to-hand combat where human training and aggression gave them the advantage. On the command bridge, War Commander Thexal watched his security forces being systematically destroyed by a tiny group of enemy soldiers. These humans fought like they had been born for war, using tactics that turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They're outnumbered 50-1 on my own ship." His tactical officers studied the combat reports with growing fear. "War Commander, these humans appear to be natural-born warriors. Their homeworld has conditioned them for exactly this kind of combat." Thexal felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest: genuine fear. The Corac Empire had built their reputation by being more violent and ruthless than their enemies. But these humans treated violence as a tool and warfare as a science. They were everything the Corac pretended to be, and they were coming for his bridge. Down on Zenturi Prime, the orbital bombardment had stopped as the Corac fleet tried to deal with human warships attacking from impossible angles. Captain Rodriguez's gamble had worked. By bringing the fight into the atmosphere, he had negated the enemy's numerical advantage and forced them to fight on human terms. The Zenturi civilians watched in amazement as their crystal cities. Sergeant Maria Santos kicked down the door to the Corac flagship's command bridge with explosive force. Behind her, 6 human Marines poured through the opening, their weapons ready and their faces set with grim determination. War Commander Thexal stood at the center of his bridge, surrounded by his remaining officers. The massive alien leader held a ceremonial sword in his clawed hands, his red eyes burning with fury and disbelief. In 50 years of conquest, no enemy had ever reached his personal command center. "So you are the famous humans," Thexal snarled, his voice like grinding stone. "You fight well for such small creatures. But this ends now." Santos looked around the bridge, taking in the dozens of Corac warriors positioned behind defensive barriers. The odds were still heavily against the human boarding party, but that had been true for the entire mission. "War Commander Thexal," she said calmly, "you are ordered to surrender your vessel and call off your attack on the Zenturi homeworld." The alien leader laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Surrender? I am the destroyer of 40 worlds. I do not surrender to anyone, especially not to creatures from some unknown backwater planet." "Your choice," Santos replied, "but you should know that your reputation doesn't scare us. On Earth we have horror movies more frightening than you." The comment confused Thexal. What was a horror movie? Why would anyone create entertainment about frightening things? These humans made no sense at all. The battle for the command bridge began when one of Thexal's officers opened fire with a heavy plasma weapon. The Marines scattered for cover, but instead of huddling defensively, they immediately began coordinating a counterattack. Corporal Jenny Lee rolled behind a control console and came up firing, her shots precisely placed to disable the enemy weapon systems rather than just kill soldiers. Private Mike Torres threw a flashbang grenade that temporarily blinded half the Corac defenders, while Sergeant Santos led a flanking maneuver around the bridge's perimeter. The humans moved like they had trained for this exact scenario their entire lives, which in many ways they had. Earth's military academies prepared soldiers for close-quarters combat in confined spaces, assuming they would eventually face enemies in places like ship corridors, building interiors, and underground bunkers. War Commander Thexal watched his elite bridge crew being systematically destroyed by a handful of human soldiers who treated his most fearsome warriors like training dummies. These creatures fought with a combination of tactical skill and controlled aggression that he had never encountered before. What manner of world creates warriors like these? He demanded as he parried a strike from Santos's combat knife. A world that doesn't coddle its children, Santos replied, pressing her attack. A world where only the strong and smart survive to adulthood. The personal duel between Santos and Thexal represented more than just two soldiers fighting. It was a clash between different philosophies of strength and survival. The Corac believed in domination through fear and overwhelming force. The humans believed in protection through skill and determination. Meanwhile, outside the flagship, the space battle reached its climax as Admiral Carl Henderson arrived with Earth's heavy battle group. The reinforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their massive ships bristling with weapons that had been designed to fight other humans in Earth's solar system wars. All ships, engage at will, Henderson commanded from his flagship, the UES Retribution. Remember, we're here to protect civilians, not to conquer territory. Disable enemy vessels when possible. Destroy them when necessary. The arrival of human reinforcements changed the entire dynamic of the battle. The Corac fleet had been designed to fight enemies who would flee from superior numbers. They had never faced opponents who would call for reinforcements and then coordinate a complex multi-fleet engagement. Captain Rodriguez, still commanding his atmospheric battle group, coordinated with Admiral Henderson to execute a pincer movement that trapped the Corac fleet between two groups of human ships. The alien vessels found themselves caught in crossfire patterns that used their own formation against them. Down on Zenturi Prime, Colonel Walsh received reports that the tide of battle was turning. The Corac ground forces, cut off from orbital support and facing human Marines who seemed to enjoy urban combat, were beginning to retreat from the capital city. "Sir, the enemy is pulling back from sectors 7 through 12, reported Staff Sergeant Pete Collins. "Should we pursue?" "Negative," Walsh replied. "Our mission is to protect the Zenturi civilians, not to hunt down every enemy soldier. Establish defensive perimeters around the civilian shelters and let them go." The decision reflected a fundamental difference between human and Corac military philosophy. The aliens fought to dominate and destroy. The humans fought to protect and preserve. Back on the Corac flagship, the battle for the bridge was reaching its conclusion. War Commander Thexal had been disarmed and wounded, his ceremonial sword lying broken on the deck. Around him, the surviving members of his bridge crew had either surrendered or been subdued by the human Marines. "It is over," Thexal admitted, his massive frame slumped against his command chair. "You have won." Santos kept her weapon trained on the alien commander while she checked on her team. 2 Marines had been wounded, but everyone was still alive and functional. For a boarding action against a heavily defended enemy flagship, those were remarkably light casualties. "Call off your remaining forces," Santos ordered. "Tell them to withdraw from Zenturi space immediately." "And if I refuse?" Thexal asked. "Then we'll hunt down every one of your ships and destroy them," Santos replied matter-of-factly. "Your choice is between an orderly withdrawal and complete annihilation. Choose wisely." The threat was delivered without emotion or bluster, which somehow made it more believable. Thexal realized that these humans would do exactly what they promised. Not out of cruelty, but simply because that was what their mission required. He activated the fleet-wide communication system with a heavy heart. "All Corac vessels. This is War Commander Thexal," he announced. Break off the attack and withdraw to deep space. The conquest of the Zenturi system has failed. The response from his fleet commanders was immediate and confused. In the history of the Corac Empire, no conquest had ever failed. They had never retreated from a weaker enemy, never been forced to abandon a planned invasion. War Commander, surely you cannot mean to retreat from these unknown aliens, protested Fleet Captain Vorthak. The Empire does not withdraw. The Empire has never faced humans before, Thexal replied wearily. These creatures are everything we pretend to be and more. They are predators from a world that makes our homeworld look like a peaceful garden. Withdraw now or be destroyed. One by one, the Corac vessels began to pull back from their attack positions. The massive fleet that had arrived with such confidence just hours before now retreated in disorder, their formations broken and their morale shattered. Dr. Alex Turner, who had been monitoring the battle from the Zenturi Palace, made contact with several of the surrendering Corac officers. His anthropological training had taught him to look for the deeper reasons behind aggressive behavior. Commander Vorthak, he said during one of the surrender negotiations, why did your empire begin conquering other worlds? The alien officer was quiet for a long moment before answering. Our homeworld is dying, he admitted. The resources are almost gone and our population is too large. We need new worlds to survive. Turner nodded thoughtfully. Have you ever considered asking for help instead of taking what you need by force? The concept seemed to puzzle Vorthak completely. Ask, you mean request assistance without threatening violence? It's a radical idea, I know, Turner replied with gentle sarcasm. But most civilized species actually prefer to help each other rather than fight. As the Corac fleet withdrew from Zenturi space, Chancellor Vexandra addressed her people from the Crystal Palace. The beautiful spires of her capital city were damaged but still standing, and the civilian population was beginning to emerge from their shelters. Today we learned that the galaxy contains both great evil and great good, she announced. The Corac Empire brought us death and slavery, but the humans of Earth brought us protection and hope. Ambassador Shaw stood beside the Zenturi leader, still amazed by how quickly the situation had been resolved. On Earth, military conflicts often lasted for years. Here in space, human efficiency and tactics had ended a major invasion in less than a day. What happens now? Vexandra asked Shaw privately. Now we help you rebuild, Shaw replied, and we make sure this never happens again. Captain Rodriguez received new orders from Earth Command as his battle group regrouped in orbit. The message was brief but significant. Establish a permanent human presence in Zenturi space to deter future aggression. 6 months after the first distress signal had reached Terra Station, Earth's first interstellar protectorate was officially established. The UES Vindicator and her escort ships would remain in the Zenturi system indefinitely, serving as a reminder that some species in the galaxy were willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. War Commander Thexal, now a prisoner of war, spent his time in detention trying to understand what had happened.